It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Thursday, November 28th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that really wants to know what Morgan Frost was thinking as he skated by the bench after that goal.
I'm sure it had expletives laced in there.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I'm Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade. I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. Can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit fanduel.com to get started. To keep up with our latest episode in Flyers news, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on all your favorite socials, including Blue Sky, and of course here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, we are going to get into the long sordid history of the Flyers on Black Friday as part of our preview of that game against the Rangers. We'll get to that later in the show. But of course, we got to talk about this 3-2 overtime come from behind win against Nashville. I'm still bewildered here by the whole
It's just
thing.
bananas. I mean, just the whole thing. I mean, it couldn't have looked more bleak. And then it looked pretty good because it's like, okay, you got a point, and then they could have lost in overtime in the first 5 seconds of it, and it was opposed. And then, hey, this is the way it goes. I mean, they know how to play when they get into this position, but they don't know how to play 60 minutes. Like, they just don't. And this game just about cost them because they didn't play 60 minutes. But they got the 2 points, so they go home for Thanksgiving with the win. They still don't have enough regulation wins. Like, this is something that I feel like the coaching staff needs to kind of drive home with them. But, for the moment, it's a good win.
Yeah, this was their 9th game this season so far to go into extra time at least, and that is a lot. It's a lot of
It's a
extra
lot.
minutes. It's a lot of extra wear and tear, so that is definitely something to consider, but certainly a fun way to end
It was
the
fun. I'm
game.
not sure if it was fun if you were there because, if you were wearing the orange and black and you were there, you're like, ugh. After two. After two, it
Right.
looked really bad.
Yeah, the Predators had 62 shot attempts up through the second period in this game. And I just did not think there was any way the Flyers were going to come back from it. The only thing that was giving me hope is that we've talked about the Flyers' second period being
Hmm.
pretty brutal,
And it
and they
wasn't bad.
escaped. It wasn't bad, and they escaped with no goals scored by
Right.
anybody. And I was
Right.
like, okay, they're hanging in here, right?
Right.
So
Right.
if they can just start getting plays on the rush, maybe they can make something happen. Now, it didn't happen until 11 seconds left in the third period, but they still managed to prevent the Preds from getting any additional goals and extending their lead. And, it was really ugly in a lot of ways. 37 giveaways is just
Ugh.
beyond unacceptable, right?
Now, there's a
But
theme. There's going to be a theme of this show. And now I'm going to have to say it as we approach American Thanksgiving with the way the Predators are playing. I don't know. Andrew Burnett's not going to have a good night's sleep. His job may be on the line.
it could be. It could be. We talked about that specifically in our preview of the
Yeah,
game. Is he on the hot seat? And
I
you
think
said
he
it was
is.
lukewarm, but now maybe the temperature's up another
I
notch.
think the temperature's up. I think this is one where they're going to look at and say, "Had we let this get away?" And it's good for the Flyers, but for them, I mean, especially with the expectations they had, could be a little bumpy.
Yeah, and I think there were two main reasons that the Flyers were able to at least maintain only being down by one goal for a long stretch. The first of which, 33 blocked shots. And
Yes.
and you saw like the effect that it had on a lot of guys
Oh, Ristolainen had
throughout the
7 or
game.
8. I mean, yeah, I mean, again, this is something where we're gonna talk about this, and, by midseason, we're gonna see the toll that it takes on a team because it does. I've watched teams
Yeah.
that do it, but
Oh,
right now, they
yeah.
it is what it is.
So it turned out that the shot attempt total from Nashville was 85 to the Flyers 45 by the end
Oof.
of the game. Absolutely brutal. And hence the block shots. Now, what I will say is the other reason is Aleksei Kolosov.
Yeah, sure. He
And
had a good game.
he had a rough beginning to the game.
Yes,
I
he
would
didn't look
say that
comfortable. That goal
no.
wasn't his fault, the first one, but he certainly was not like where he should be in positioning on that. And it was a rocky start for him, for sure.
Right, and what I saw was the Flyers defense collapsing around him because I feel like they fed off that nervousness and that uncertainty that Kolosov was giving off, and defensively, they were kinda collapsed around him, hence a lot more block shots, right?
Right, right.
I like, the beginning of the second period through the rest of the game, I had no issues with Kolosov. I thought he
No,
really got it together and played a very strong second and third periods.
yeah, no question. That was a good game for him. I mean, again, there's going to be a day of reckoning when Sam Harrison's back because I don't know how long you can go with three goalies, and somebody's going to have to get sent down
Yeah, that's going to be a really, really challenging decision for the coaching staff to figure out what to do
because
next
nobody's playing
there.
bad enough to be sent down, but somebody's going to have to go at some point.
Right. So we talked about Morgan Frost in the intro to the
We
show.
did.
So we got to talk more about that
Yeah,
goal. And he had a very good play on the rush earlier in the game that
yeah.
didn't go. And I was just like, oh, like that was so close. I feel like he's going to at least get another chance like that. And this was a little different because it was a tip, but you saw him get down the ice and get in the right position, and I think, that's one of the skills he brings to the table is that he's very, very good at being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's, not a lot of guys on this team that have that same skill set where he's at least got a chance to pull off things like this. And, you can't do it from the bench. Do I wonder? And I do have to openly wonder, like if this game would have gone through tied in overtime, we would think, oh, you'd have to use Morgan Frost in the shootout. But like we said that the last time. So and luckily it didn't come to that. But this is the reason that you have to stick with this guy. Does that mean he won't get traded? No, because I think, there's a chance he will, but I still think this is the reason you stick with him because of this kind of upside.
Yeah, I think so. It was interesting because, he had the second most scoring chances for in this game. It definitely showed.
Yeah.
He stood out a lot. Joel Farabee was the guy who had the most scoring chances for the Flyers in this game, and he's one of the guys we talked about on
Yeah.
yesterday's show about needing to get things going and, how he should do it, and we said, "Take more shots." Well, he did this
Okay. At
game, and so, it
least
didn't
one
pay
of those
off.
guys did.
Yeah, yeah, well, that's I wanted to single him out for that
Right. No, that's
reason,
good
just
because,
because.
but all three didn't, but at least he did.
Yeah, I think so, and got Mitchkov who just missed on the post in overtime,
Yeah,
that
it's
would have
going to
been pretty
happen.
sweet,
Oh, sure.
but
Yeah.
I think, he struggled in this game a little bit
He
just
did.
because everybody struggled. I don't think it
Right.
was, like, something
No, listen,
particular to
Nashville was
him.
doing some things that were throwing the Flyers off. They were first to pucks. Like, look, for the first two periods, I thought the game they played against Vegas was showing as far as maybe what it took out of them. They got a
Right,
second win. They did well, but there is there's a residual effect of these kinds of games when you're in these kinds of games all the time.
right, and I think the other thing is, you look at the leaders on this team, right? And you have like Travis Sanheim, you have Sean Couturier, they all stepped up when it got to crunch time, and especially
Right.
with Couturier scoring that overtime goal. But Konechny was part of that play.
Hmm.
Sanheim and Couturier were part of the play on Morgan Frost's goal.
Hmm.
So I think that aspect of it was important as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean that part's really clicking for them, and that is good. I mean, I think York looked pretty good. He looked better than last game. Beyond that, mm, it was kind of fair, but those guys were good.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. But all in all, all's well that ends well, I guess
Hmm.
is the right thing to
Yeah,
say
I
about
mean
this
it's a happy
game.
flight home, no matter how we look at it. So
Yep, yep. You gotta love it. All right. Well, our next game for the Flyers is against the New York Rangers. It's the traditional Black Friday game, and there is a very interesting history of the Flyers and their traditional Black Friday game, and we're going to get into all of that coming up next.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5, get 150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats for you live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Go with the Bengals over the Steelers here. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with 150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Some of the best events take place around the holidays, and there's so many of them to choose from. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. My favorite part of the Gametime app is that it's great for getting notified about last minute flash deals and super deals, so you know you're getting the best bang for your buck. Best of all, they have all in pricing, so there's no surprise fees at checkout when you activate the feature. Also, your tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through email. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. So on our Friday show, we will be recapping the Flyers versus Rangers game. We're going to record that after the game, so you won't have an episode launching first thing in the morning, but stay tuned because we're going to recap that game. Then we're going to preview part 2 of Flyers versus Blues and wrap up the week and look at how the Flyers stand at Thanksgiving. So the Flyers are playing the New York Rangers on Black Friday, and the Flyers have had a tradition of playing in Black Friday games, mostly in the afternoon. So we're going to dig into the history of this whole thing and what the Flyers' record is and some fun facts. This is like a fascinating exercise, I must say. So really, this thing started in 1989. They may have had some Black Friday games prior to that, but it really wasn't a tradition until starting in 1989. That's when there was some consistency with the Flyers having an afternoon game on Black Friday and mostly at home. So in that time frame from 1989 to last year, the Flyers have been 16, 13, and 1 in that time frame. Yes, there was a tie in that window. I miss ties. 5 of those years, there was no game because we had 3 lockouts during that time frame. I can't believe it.
It makes you nauseous seeing it. I can believe it, though.
Yeah, so that was in 94, 2004, 2012, right? 1996, there was no game because there was just none scheduled that year. The Flyers were in the middle of a road trip and there was no Black Friday game. And of course, 2020, we all know what happened then. So as far as opponents, you're looking at, a variety of them. I think for me, when I was thinking about looking at this, I thought, it's just the Rangers. It's been mostly the Rangers, but this is only the 5th time they've played the New York Rangers in all of those games. And the thing is, it's recency bias because it's crunched from 2014 to this year, which will be the 5th time that the Flyers will face the Rangers on Black Friday.
Yeah, it's just weird. It seems like, yeah, the Rangers always come in. They seem to take the train. It just seems like it's every year, but it's not. But yeah, it's interesting. I've covered quite a few of these now, but for some of these, I was in the area, but I wasn't covering. I was covering some other teams, and so I never realized it was this many games. But I see guy names like Paul Ranheim. That's a forgotten name for me. Yeah, I just it's funny with seeing the coaching changes or the carousel, I guess I should say, because
Yeah.
the Rangers, Flyers have really shared a lot of coaches, and then 3 or 4 of these coaches have been with a lot of teams.
Yeah, so the coaching carousel has a lot to do with it. Prior to the Rangers being the main team, it was actually the Toronto Maple Leafs. We had 4 games against them on Black Friday between 1990 and 2002. Only 2 of the games were away games, and that was the aforementioned tie in 2001 in Dallas. That was an evening game, wasn't an afternoon game. And then there was one afternoon game in 2005, which was a 5-3 win in Boston, which was a noon game. 21 out of these 30 games were at 1 p.m. A couple were earlier, a few were 3 p.m. or later.
I remember
But it's
3 p.m. or later, and I was like, 3 p.m.'s better than 1 p.m. I kind of like the 3 better.
Yeah, well, 1 p.m. is what it's
I
generally
know.
been
I
through
know.
this history. And, you mentioned some random names and coaching and all of that. This Black Friday game has had a tremendous history behind it. Going back to the first one in 1989, the Flyers won that game against the Edmonton Oilers 5-1. Paul Holmgren was behind the bench for the Flyers.
Yeah.
Murray Craven 2-goal game. We got a goal from Keith Acton, if that's a name that triggers anybody. I apologize for that.
Mostly for coaching, not for
I
playing.
know, I know. But your first coaching drama related to this was in 1991. The Flyers lost to the Pittsburgh Penguins 9-3. Kevin Stevens had 4 goals and an assist for the Pens in that game.
Yeah, Kevin
Mark
Stevens used to be able to fill it, man.
Yeah, Mark Recchi scored for the Pens in that game. The Flyers goaltending duo, because clearly there was a change of goaltending, was Dominic Roussel and Ken Reggett, which, oh my
Yeah,
God, right?
bad
So,
times, bad times.
so this game was part of an 8-game winless streak. There was a tie in there, but Paul Holmgren got fired 2 games later and was replaced by Bill Dineen temporarily.
I remember
Uh,
when Bill Dineen was their coach. Yeah, you know what the thing is? I mean, part of the problem with the coaching firings, you can't blame Flyers management because there's that old saying, hey, if you're in the playoffs and in American Thanksgiving, you're going to make the playoffs, and most likely you're not, even though the Flyers proved that wrong last year. But
Correct.
but that was always the thinking. So it probably helped in getting some of the coaches fired,
Yeah, and of course, these early games were at the Spectrum, and
Right.
in the
Right.
in the old building,
Yeah, I didn't go to one
and
Black Friday game at the Spectrum. Not one.
yeah, so the last Black Friday game at the Spectrum was in 1995. Eric Lindros scored 2 goals in that game and a win over the Detroit Red Wings. Prior to that, there was another name that popped up 2 years in a row, 92, 93. The Flyers won those games. And Gary Galley scored empty net goals in both of those games, 2 Black Fridays in a row, which is just a weird stat and a
Just
weird name to bring up, but completely like out of left field.
truly bizarre, out of left field for sure. Looking at the
Yeah.
times, though, you mentioned all these other times. Where the hell did the 11:31 fit in? I don't even remember
Yeah.
I don't understand that one.
Yeah, that's a very weird time to start a game. That was much, much later
Yeah.
in 2013. But going back to the opening of the then named Core States Center in 1997, that was the first time there was a Black Friday game in that building. In 1996, there wasn't a game scheduled that year. So it took until the following year. That was when they debuted the black third jersey.
Right.
In that game, John LeClair and Chris Gratton each had 2 goals
Chris
in that
Gratton, that
game.
probably after getting that big contract, that big fat contract.
Yeah, the following year in '98, the building had been renamed the First Union Center already.
The FU
And,
Center. That was the best name of all of them.
oh, it was. It totally was. And then, that line of Keith Jones, and Eric Lindros and John LeClair accounted for 3 of the 4 goals in that game.
Still not sure why Keith
Um,
Jones was on that line. I would say it to him. It's okay.
yes, yes. Oh, he would say that too. He
Yeah.
has said that many
Yeah.
times.
Yeah, it doesn't
Many
make sense.
times. So the building was renamed again in 2003, so it was the Wachovia Center that year. And then, of course, we had the lockout after that.
Yeah.
Looking ahead to 2007, Mike Richards and Jeff Carter both scored in that game. Danny Briere scored in that game against the Washington Capitals. They did lose that one. So, it was a tough game that time around, but just having Mike Richards and Jeff Carter on the Flyers is like some challenging memories, we'll say.
Yes, that's a little while back, and nobody's really thinking about that these days.
Right. So then here's where things get absolutely nuts because 2008, the Flyers lost to the Carolina Hurricanes 3-2 in overtime, two overtimes in a row where the Flyers lost in the Black Friday game, by the way. In that game against Carolina, Peter Laviolette was Carolina's coach. John Stevens was the Flyers coach. And after Stevens was fired that year, or like the following year, right? Lavi would be the next Flyers coach, right? So even in that following year, John Stevens was behind the bench. It was the third Black Friday loss in a row, this time to the Buffalo Sabres. And that was a huge part of why Stevens got fired. And then they brought in Peter Laviolette, who now joins them for Black Friday in 2010 against the Calgary Flames, which they lost in a shootout. That was the first Black Friday game to go to a shootout. The
Right.
building is now the Wells Fargo Center.
Yep.
So everything changes and everything is still the same.
It's wild. It's just crazy how many times some of these coaches have been recycled, and it always just seemed like Peter Laviolette was always coming in as the opposing coach after that.
Yeah, and that 2010 game was the first time Claude Giroux pops up on the radar. He
Yeah.
was in the shootout and scored one of the goals in that loss. But there is so much more of this history to get into with some more names that are a blast from the past. And we will get into that and talk about the New York Rangers coming up next.
Here's the thing. We earn points on groceries, travel, and practically everything else we buy. But we should also be earning points on rent, one of our biggest monthly expenses. Built changed the game by letting renters earn high-value points on rent and around their neighborhood. There's no cost to join Built. As a member, you'll earn valuable points on rent and on your everyday spending. Built points can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, and even the ones you haven't heard of. There are over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties around the world you can redeem your Built points towards. Points could also be redeemed towards a future rent payment and unique experiences that only Built members can access. So if you're not earning points on rent, my question is, why not? Start earning points by paying rent now when you go to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnhl. That's joinbuilt.com/lockedonnhl. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. Joinbuilt.com/lockedonnhl to start earning points with your rent payments today.
All right, so diving back into this history, 2012 was the lockout, and 2013, Craig Berube was behind the bench because Peter Laviolette got fired 3 games into that season.
And he was salty after he came, after that. Like, he didn't
Very
forgive the
salty.
Flyers for a very long time for that.
No, and both Flyers goals in that 2-1 win over Winnipeg were unassisted from Sean Couturier and Scott
Yeah.
Hartnell. So that was kind of interesting. Skip to 2015.
Wait, don't skip to 2015, only because in 14, I see that Steve Mason was in net. And it's probably the last time Steve Mason was in net for Craig Berube. It always seemed like he didn't want to play Steve Mason after a while.
That's true, because the Rangers won that one in a 3-0 shutout, right?
Yeah, he just didn't seem to like Steve Mason. Like, it just,
No.
yeah, that was the thing.
All right, and speaking of the Nashville Predators, that's who we faced in 2015, won that one in OT, finally got an OT win there. It was the first Black Friday game for Dave Haxtell. Shane Gostisbehere had the OT winner for the Flyers, but Peter Laviolette was behind the bench for Nashville.
Yeah, I remember that too. I do. I remember all that.
So again, the coaching carousel strikes because in the immediate next year, 2016, Alain Vigneault was behind the bench for the Rangers, our opponent. The Rangers won that game 3-2, and Kevin Hayes scored for the Rangers in that game in 2016. And our friend Chris Van de Velde scored one of the Flyers goals in that game.
I mean, if Kevin Hayes is playing and you're on FanDuel, bet that Kevin Hayes is going to get a goal on Black Friday. It's a pretty good bet.
Yeah. The next year, the Flyers lost in OT to the Islanders 5-4. It was a terrible game. The Flyers were up 2 goals before the third period and wound up losing. So we're going to move on. Back to the New York Rangers in 2018, a Calvin Pickard shutout.
I remember that.
Yeah, Coots had a 2-goal game. Flyers had 46 shots on goal
46. That's all on Henrik.
on
That's
Henrik,
it.
on Henrik, and they scored 4 of them. So,
It's a pretty good game.
yeah, it was a good game. Now, 2019, Alan Vigneault is behind the bench for the Flyers, and Kevin Hayes scores the goal for the Flyers.
There's the Kevin Hayes goal again. Yeah.
Yeah, so between 2016 and 2019, same coach, same player, uh, opposite teams. It's absolutely crazy, the coaching carousel. And then 2021, the Flyers lost to the Carolina Hurricanes 6-3. That was the fifth loss of a 10-game losing streak for the Flyers. Vigneault was fired after loss 8 in that 10-game
See,
streak.
that's
If
what I'm
we
saying. It's like, the Black Friday game does set a tone with American
It does.
Thanksgiving. It really
It
does.
does, because Mike Yeo took over, obviously, as interim for the rest of that season, didn't come back, and then we got John Tortorella. Flyers have lost the last 3 Black Friday games, under 2 different coaches. So,
Yeah.
hoping John Tortorella can break this, streak here, and, especially the one in 2022, it was the 9th loss in a row for the Flyers at that time, and it was against the Pittsburgh Penguins 4-1, and who else but Ryan Poehling scored 2 for the Pens in that game.
That's fun.
So, second year in a row against the New York Rangers. Of course, we lost to them 3-1 last year. The Flyers just couldn't solve Igor Shesterkin. 37 shots on goal for the Flyers in that one.
Yeah.
Not sure if we're going to see Shesterkin this time around. He is or did play last night against the aforementioned Carolina Hurricanes in the game that they had last night. So, I think, turning to those New York Rangers, they've got a little bit of drama going on right now where the GM is suggesting that they're going to make some trades. Like, what do you think is going on there?
Well, I mean, it's easy for the GM to suggest making trades, but when you have guys like Jacob Trouba, who has a full no move still, uh, and reason he didn't want to get traded is because his wife works in Manhattan and is a doctor at a hospital, and that's kind of a thing you can't just uproot your family for, so that's not easy. And then
Right.
Chris Kreider just changed to a 15-team no trade, but 15 teams, it's like good luck getting that one through. So I think it's more of a wake up. But could I see Kako getting traded? Sure. I could see, other players getting traded to shake it up. If you go back in Rangers history, a lot of times, now again, the Rangers are singularly owned this time, but when they were owned by corporations, a lot of times they would ask for these kinds of shakeups to kind of, get things going. I don't think they're in a position where they should do that. I just think the Metro is so strong that they're probably panicking a little because as good as the Rangers are, and they haven't played as many games as some other teams, but as good as they are, they're in the wild card spot, and they may be where they end up because that division's good and the Caps are really good and everybody's really good. And I think the Devils are going to win the division, so it may be where they end up.
Yeah, I think as long as the Caps hold it together, I think that's where the Rangers are going to end up. And they've
Yeah,
been a little inconsistent. They
sure.
lost 3 in a row before last night, 5-5 in their previous 10. Not a great November overall, just 6-5. They lost, to the Blues, the Oilers, and the Flames. So like a mix of teams there. Philip Hedl has been hurt, and I think that's affected them to some degree. They may be overworking Shesterkin a little bit.
Yeah, I think Quick will be in this one, and Quick's really good. I mean, he had a bad outing not that long ago, but he's been good this year, and he knows his role. It's not an easy game facing Jonathan Quick, even at this
No,
age.
the Rangers power play has been less good than it has been recently. I think, they're down to 12th in the league, which is still better than the Flyers, but not as good as the Rangers power play has been in the past or earlier this season in October.
No, but some guys are starting to do a little better. I know Zibanejad, everybody's been on his case this year, but feels like he's playing a little better. Look, I think a lot of things get blown out of proportion in New York, and I think when they have these cup aspirations, that's what causes it. But yeah, like Zibanejad's had points in his last 5 games. It's better than he was, but it's still not where he should be. But still, guy still has a great shot. Like you don't want to really be on the power play facing that shot because if he gets hot, they still have good players on the power play. And as long as Artemi Panarin's on the team, you got to watch out.
Yeah, and on the other side of things, they're one of the couple of teams that have a better penalty kill than the Flyers. There aren't
Yeah.
many, but they are one of them. So the Flyers power play would have to work very, very hard in this one. The Rangers do give up a number of shots on net. Now that's
Mhm.
because of Shesterkin and they trust him
Yes.
and they're willing to give up those shots. So I think that stat is a little misleading here, just given their goaltending. But they have well above 3 goals for per game, and they allow less than 3 goals per game, and that's just something the Flyers are going to have to overcome.
Yeah, two things I think that the Flyers have to watch out for. One is Adam Fox is just a catalyst out there. It's crazy to me he does not have a goal on the season, but he has 17 assists, which is a lot. And so he still makes a lot of things happen out there. Alexei Lafreniere is a weapon in the crease. He's got a tremendous shot. He's way stronger than he was 2 years ago, and so he's having his finest year. So he's 16 points in 20 games. It's a great year for him. Will Cooley is having his best year. He's got 9 goals. He's another guy who could play in the crease area. So the crease is going to get overloaded no matter who the Flyers are putting in there, and that's something where I think the Rangers are going to try and get some of their goals from.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be a tough game, and it's unfortunate that the Flyers have been on a little bit of a losing streak in these Black Friday games, but they'll have all the opportunity in the world to try and get back on track with them, and kind of turn the ship around as far as these afternoon games go, which also can feel like a little bit cursed.
Yeah, and I still would watch out for Chris Kreider because he's told me personally,
If
like
he
in inter
plays.
if he plays, he loves coming to Philly. He gets all fired up. He says the minute he's off the train, it's all business. Like he's told me that more than a few times. Like he loves playing here. So you know how some guys do that, Barnaby. Some guys used to come in as the opposing player
Yep.
and just love playing here. So if he plays, I'd watch out for him because with all this talk, he's probably going to have something to prove too.
Yep.
It's a tough
It's
game.
very,
It'll be a
very
tough game.
possible.
It'll be a tough game.
So we will talk about that game on the Friday show
Yeah.
along with round 2 against the St. Louis Blues. We'll have our Flyers at the Thanksgiving break discussion. We're going to do that, like I said, after the Flyers versus Rangers game. So we'll have an episode up in the late afternoon, early evening. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. You can send in those mailbag questions or Flyers thoughts via any of our socials at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology on all those same socials, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey, become a fantasy hockey expert, and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.